after. I want to tell you guys good evening and welcome to the show. As always, thank you for choosing to spend your Thursday night with me. I am truly, truly humbled. My show is called I Got Something to Say. It must be true. My name is Hank Batiste. I'm your host tonight, and the voices in my head they're terrified and disgusted at the court system, terrified and disgusted at the police, terrified and ultra disgusted at the legislators. So we come down hard on the racist police departments of America, but seldom, very seldom, do we talk about the root cause and why most judges tend to side with the police department, even when they know that the cop has gone too far. In short, the police work in conjunction with the court system. That's why they call them officers of the court. Then the court blames the legislators or the legislative guidelines for sentencing. Meanwhile, the true reason for the disparity in sentencing and the disparity in how blacks and black people are treated, and especially black men, in both the street by the police and the courts by the judges, it boils down to one word. That word is discretion. With authority comes power. With power comes the ability to err on the side of discretionary punishment, if you will, or just giving them a potential warning and sending them on their way. Police have the discretion not to arrest. If you've ever been pulled over, you know the police can say you were driving fast, where you headed, and they may not even look for yourself. They may look in the car and see that your wife is pregnant or, something is going on, and they just let you go. That's discretion. By the same token, when the police choose to arrest, it feeds into the court system. And then there's a deluge of defendants that ultimately become the enemy of the state. Now, I'll explain that a little bit later. But then this is where the judge's authority and power comes in. Just like the police, the judge has the discretion to hear the case or to throw the case out. I know we were all appalled. I was so appalled when I saw the black judge come down off the bench to give Amber Guerre a hug after she murdered Botham Jean. I didn't like the optics of it, but then I thought about it. I've never seen a judge show that much compassion. There's a white judge that, is a YouTube sensation, and he employs what we call old school common sense to people in his court. But even him being as compassionate as he is, I've never seen him come down off the bench. Now, I've seen him call, little kids up when, their dad is on trial or what have you, and ask the little kid, what you think I should do and this sort of thing. And he makes a criminal proceeding like family court. And I think this is a great turn if more judges use that discretion and show that humanity. They don't have to come down off the bench to give you a hug. If you say, you know what, I understand that you had a bad day. You didn't just shoot 8 people in, massage parlor and 3 massage parlors. because that takes a certain amount of premeditation. So I was appalled again when the police chief decided to speak on behalf of this mass murderer and say he was just having a bad day and he has a sex addiction. I was equally appalled when I saw the bailiff stroking Amber's hair. And when it all went viral and it got so much backlash, she said she was searching her hair for contraband. Oh, really? No. I was so upset that it's one of the reasons why I started doing the podcast, because I just felt like we the disenfranchised. And I've got some friends who are independently wealthy, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't have any friends that are that wealthy, that they don't feel somewhat disenfranchised, like they don't feel like they could relate to the common poor man. When cops have a history of complaints, we tend to hear about it, even if it's found to be inadmissible in his or her trial. But we never hear, like in the Old West, about judges who have the propensity for, in the Old West, they call them hanging judges, quick to hand out these elaborate sentences. This is crazy because just like we have the Derek Chauvins who have 18 or 19 civil complaints in 18 years, I'm sure that there are a lot of judges like that, especially given the fact that Mitch McConnell put judges on the bench with a specific agenda. So when you or I go to court, we run a risk of even if we quote unquote live, we run the risk of having our character assassinated or murdered, if you will. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the broken judicial system and how it negatively impacts poor and the disenfranchised people. Tonight's show is called Just Us: The Anatomy of a Black Lives Matter hashtag. So hang on tight. Let's omit the logic. This shit makes no sense. I got something to say. It must be true. First up, let's talk about discretion versus enemy of the state. Before I even get started, let me concede one thing to you. I cannot tell you anything that you don't already know. You've witnessed it, you've seen it on the news, you hear about it, but I bring it up for two reasons. My God-fearing mom knew that the law didn't necessarily work for me or us most of the time, but she, like most church-going mothers, she told me to trust in God and keep my nose clean. In short, stay out of trouble and do the right thing. Every reverend in every Black church, and I don't know, I've only attended a limited number of white churches, but every reverend in every Black church that I've ever gone to has this point in his or her sermon. Every deacon, every mother of the church, a deaconess, has this at some point in their prayer, this line that God is my lawyer in the courtroom. Just like my mom, your mom, right? My mom taught me and led me to believe that if you didn't do anything wrong, you don't need a lawyer. Only guilty people need lawyers. Dead wrong. Dead wrong, Ma. That's how poor people think. I did not sell drugs other than smoking a little weed briefly one summer. I didn't do drugs. I grew up in a house where my mother took and kept a well-stocked bar. We had vodka, we had scotch, we had rum, we had wine, we had gin, and we had all of these mixes. Despite growing up in New Orleans, where it's possible to go to a gas station and say, give me $5 of regular and a bottle of Jack Daniels, despite growing up in New Orleans, where you can go to a daiquiri, a drive-through daiquiri shop, with a police car sitting in the parking lot and drive off sipping on a 46-ounce daiquiri. I didn't really drink growing up, despite all of these things. We get the occasional daiquiri with a shrimp or oyster po' boy and go to the lakefront. But we just weren't really into drinking like that. Or I wasn't. Me and most of the guys I hung out with. Nobody gets arrested at the daiquiri shop in New Orleans or leaving the gas station or walking down the street in the French Quarters. No cop follows you to see whether you're drinking and driving or if you're driving after you drink. Because tourism and discretion. Because of how I was raised, because of where I was raised, I never needed a lawyer. New Orleans in the world was a different place back then. Good people were not treated like a revenue stream to support the police and court system. We supported the system by the taxes that we paid, and that was enough. When me and my high school buddy, Bruce, decided to see whether his heavy Chevy was faster than my 350 Buick, we tore off down Louisa Street, past the park, and then we saw these flashing blue lights. And once I dusted Bruce, I turned the corner, and back then you had something called a carburetor. And the carburetor flooded when I cut the car off. And Bruce turned the corner behind me. We got out of our cars and we were talking back and forth, just talking smack. And then we saw the cop turn the corner as well. I jumped in my car, Bruce jumped in his car, and we tried to get away. But the carburetor was flooded, couldn't go nowhere. The cops came there to us a new butthole, talked about taking us to jail, and then stepped to the side and said, man, they're good kids. There's no need to throw them in the system. Black cop and white cop, we used to call them Starsky and Hutch. They knew that if we went into the system, somebody's on here now, she and I were talking about this because I remember being in boot camp. I remember being in school. I remember, guys would get called into either the DI's office or the company commander's office, or they would get called into the director's office, and it would say, on further review, we just found out that you have this police record that's going to make it hard, almost impossible, for you to get a professional license. Back then, it showed some discretion. If it was something that you did at the ages 18, 19, 20, and you've gotten your life together, they cut you some slack. That was then. This is now. If we fast forward to today, my mama would no longer say, stay out of trouble and you'll be fine. Reb would still preach that God is my lawyer in the courtroom. But truth be told, discretion is a fond memory of the past, like afros and bell bottoms. If you enter the court today, if you're Black, if you're poor, you're guilty. and it's impossible to prove your innocence, you're going to receive some type of restitution that you have to pay. This makes you an enemy of the state, because when the case is presented, it's Henry Batiste versus the state of. Henry Batiste versus the United States of America. Really? Am I public enemy number one? Simply because I was doing 65 and a 40 or 45? That makes me public enemy number one. Understand that there's a inherent safety hazard there. This is simply because you become the financial grease that lubricates and supports the judges and the cops. As such, you are the enemy of the state. Suddenly, is Dante right versus the state of Minnesota? The judge no longer says, has anyone talked? If you don't show up in court, the judge no longer says, has anyone talked to Mr. Wright? Has anyone reached out to him? Let's reschedule this and give the young man a chance to speak up. Maybe something happened and he couldn't make it to court today. Let's give him one more chance. Now, you don't get that benefit of the doubt. Instead, it's let's issue a failure to appear bench warrant for Mr. Wright's arrest. Now you're one police encounter away from becoming a Black Lives Matter hashtag. Now your life depends solely on the discretion of the cop who runs your tag because you have an air freshener sitting on your rearview mirror, or you have the misfortune of driving while black. So now this person follows you, and even when you haven't done anything, your first reaction is, let me hold up, let me slow down, let me check what I'm doing, let me check the speed limit. Now the cop can say anything. You were driving erratic, you were acting some kind of way, and they gave him and blah, 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 blah. Now it comes down to how many cruisers show up when you're pulled over. The more police that show up to a traffic stop, the greater the risk of one of them, just one of them, pulling their Glock and saying, I made a mistake. Taser, taser, taser. Oh shit, I shot him. The more police that show up, the greater the likelihood of one of the 9 police to shoot an unarmed black man and say, I feared for my life and the life of the 9 police who were standing out there in full regalia with bulletproof jackets, a taser, a gun, and you had nothing but your hands and feet. But somehow he's justified, he or she is justified in something about your movement made them fear for their life. Today, because of this newfound I fear for my life that seemed to evade the consciousness of the entire District of Columbia Police Department and the Capitol Hill Police Department, on January 6th, the term qualified immunity is now common vernacular. It's commonplace. It's something that we all talk about, and probably 80% of us know what this means. And I'm getting angry. So you know what happens when I get angry. As a result of qualified immunity, there's a reluctancy to prosecute bad or historically racist cops who have the propensity to treat black men or Black Lives Matter protesters differently than they treated the domestic terrorists who attempted to overthrow the government on January the 6th. And now we see legislators who are blocking the investigation or who are trying to create diversion by saying, well, if we look at this, we should look at Antifa. We should look at Black Lives Matter. No, 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 no. When Black Lives Matter was there, you showed up in full regalia and riot gear. You had a show of force, and they couldn't even get on the Capitol grounds. It's been said time and time again by police who were trying to protect the Capitol. I can't talk, people. I apologize. It's been said time and time again by police who were trying to protect the Capitol that day that they were given a directive not to shoot. And the only person that was shot and killed was the one woman who was trying to come through the window as they were trying to evacuate the congressman. And that's the only reason it pisses me off to the utmost of pissosity when I hear them say insurrection. Stop discounting what these domestic terrorists did. It was a freaking coup attempt. If they had gotten their hands on Mike Pence, they would have hung him. If they had gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi, as much as I dislike Nancy, and I think it's time that her behind should have sat down a long time ago and passed the gavel, Lord knows what they would have done to her. When we think about the criminal justice system, like Richard Pryor said, it's just us. It comes as no surprise that 46% of people or men on death row are Black men, when we are 13% of the overall population. Folks, that's disparity. That's systematic racism. We tend to only emphatically discuss systematic injustice when a Black man dies from a cop kneeling on his neck and choking the life out of him. After a few months, maybe people tend to focus on the cops and ask for forgiveness and want to show him some latitude. Amber has been in jail for less than a year, and they're trying to throw out her conviction and let her get on with her life. What really threw this off was there was nothing they could say about Botham Jean. This boy had worked to become an accountant. He didn't even have a speeding ticket, so they couldn't assassinate his character. What pisses me off is the fact that no one points out the judges who disproportionately sentence Black men to stiffer fines and prison sentences more so than white men committing the very same act. New drug usage and sentencing. Drug uses, white to Black. Sentencing, Black to white. Death row inmates, Black, white. Once parole, employment opportunities are nil. They're almost non-existent. It's hard enough getting the job when you don't have a police record. So imagine what happens afterwards. Does the judge on the bench think about that? No. You come up in there, you are either X amount of dollars to the system or your X amount of hours to the system as an indentured slave. They call it community service. I call it indentured servitude or slavery. Plain and unlike policing, no judge is ever identified as being racist or treating Black people or people of color differently. even when poor people and people of color are targeted as revenue streams in, in all Black municipalities and jurisdictions. No eyebrows are raised. The prosecutor is Black, the judge is Black, the police are Black. And then we wonder why it's so easy for the Asians to pass a bill that refer to a hate crime when we are seeing Black on Black hate every day in the penal system, in the criminal justice system. Unlike white judges who employ discretion with other white defendants with a known criminal past, Black judges, Black prosecutors, and other Black professionals fuel their ambitions on the backs of Black men, Black women, people of color, and poor people. We call them the disenfranchised, but they are people nonetheless. Once upon a time, we thought that having Black police, Black attorneys, Black judges would ensure that Black people would be treated fairly. Instead, it's the same Black police, Black attorney, Black judge, and legislatures who capitulate or bow down to the system and create this systematic racism. Unlike Jews and Asians, we know what happened. Margaret Taylor Greene had been acting an ass until she messed up and she said the magic word, JEW. It's time to go. Even Kevin McCarthy, who wants to be Speaker of the House so bad, Trump hasn't had to use tissue paper a day since he left office. Even Kevin McCarthy turned on her. What if we did the same thing? Unlike Jews, unlike Asians, it's the Black police, it's the Black attorney, it's the Black prosecutor, it's the Black judge, it's the Black legislator who is the skeleton in the anatomy of a Black Lives Matter hashtag, people. It's simple as that. I know it sounds redundant, but that's all I got for you tonight. Before I go, I want to do something, though. I want to burden with every Black cop, every Black attorney, every Black judge, and every Black legislator with doing something within, doing everything in their power to ensure that Black people are that are trusted to you. The Black person that you encounter as a police on the street, the Black person that you call a defendant that you encounter while you're sitting on the bench, the Black person that you encounter as a defendant when you're the prosecutor, instead of saying, wow, here's an easy one for me to make my bones on, to further my career on, because nobody's gonna cry racism. I'm Black, they're Black. They'll be all right. I challenge each of you to do everything in your power to help us poor, us defenseless, us powerless Black men, us Black women, us people of color, and other poor disenfranchised people. Help us. With every case that's trusted to you, treat us as though we were your brother, your child, your family member, or your best friend. If Black lives truly matter to you, help us, the disenfranchised, to mend this fractured skeleton that has become the anatomy of a Black Lives Matter hashtag.